Hey guys, Terry Red here, and in this video, we are going to be continuing my Future Pinball and BAM Essentials All-in-One video series, and this is going to be part 2, which is the Future Pinball and BAM Info Guide. So this is basically a newer version of what used to be my Future Pinball and BAM Mega Guide, but now I've stripped away the extra sections of it, like for example, the installation portion, which is now its own guide, and all my guides are now part of this package that you can install, and they're all now in PDF format, and they're all in this folder right here. And the previous one we did, which everyone needs to do, is to use the install guide to make sure you're up to date with all the newest files and everything else that's included in the package. And that's this video here. That's part 1 that takes you through the process. It's actually quite quick and easy to do. Despite this video length, that's me describing a lot of stuff, but it doesn't take very long to do, guys. Whether it's a new install or an update, so you need to make sure you follow that first to get yourself updated before you get to this video. All right. Okay, so you're at the point where you've got Future Pinball BAM set up and running, and it's working well and all that, but you don't know much about either how either program works or what how they're supposed to work together, their features and settings and things like that. So that's what this guide's about. It's basically a lot more of the more advanced details of everything for each program. So to find this guide, it's going to be located inside my setup and guides folder within the Future Pinball folder, and it's going to be in here. All right. So I'm just going to take you through everything and kind of just talk about some things and maybe demonstrate a few things here and there. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So we're just going to go right through it. So when you carry through this guide here, first of all, it's going to tell you what I just told you. You need the Future Pinball BAM Essentials all-in-one package, the newest version installed, so that way you're up to date. And it has a nice table of contents here. So that way you can jump to the specific section that you need. That way you don't have to search for everything the hard way. So Future Pinball and BAM. So basically the core program of Future Pinball. So that would be this guy right here. This is the same program that we've had since 2009, 2010. So the main program of Future Pinball, the editor, the player itself, is the exact same. It hasn't been changed. So what we have is we have a separate program called BAM. Originally called Better Arcade Mode. It was made by Rav Arcade, and he created it originally to add a better cabinet mode. Arcade mode is cabinet mode, is what it is. So he added that feature, but he also added lots of things like head tracking and all sorts of other initial stuff, mainly to give it a better cabinet mode. But ever since then, he has added a huge amount of stuff to it that has updated Future Pinball, has fixed a lot of problems, has added a ton of new features for the player, but also for table creators, so that they can completely add new features to tables, and it's basically modernized Future Pinball. Like it's completely transformed what you can do with it. So this is like a general idea of some of the features that it does, but there's still way more than that. Like, I mean, it can, update the lighting, the shadows. It can do VR. It allows us to use new, better physics. All sorts of other things. It's just a fantastic program. So when we use Future Pinball, we always use BAM, because we run BAM, and BAM then launches Future Pinball, because BAM is what updates it, what adds stuff to it, and what fixes stuff with it. So it's important that you understand that dynamic, that the Future Pinball portion is all the same. So the table creation for the editor is all the same, but then when we run a table, BAM takes over and then adds the extra stuff to the table that we add either through table script or through the BAM menu or through other means. So yeah, it's fantastic. So Future Pinball is not like Visual Pinball. It doesn't use ROMs or a B2S server. Future Pinball has a built-in translate backglass editor and window built in, so you don't have to run a separate program if you just want to have basic backglass support. It's built right into Future Pinball, and Future Pinball will launch a playfield window on one screen and a back-glass window on a separate screen. So it's different in Visual Pinball in that respect. Now that being said, we could still use extra things like Pinup Player and PuP-Packs with Future Pinball, which is what I do on my PinEvent releases. All right, so it's just important to understand, but there are no ROMs, there's no pin name or anything else. Everything is coded by scratch in Future Pinball. So it's important to understand that distinct difference there. All right, so the first part of this guide is going to be similar to the install guide. It's just basically telling you how to just properly run Future Pinball, the settings that you use. Now these batch files, I'll talk more about, but it's going to go through, the basic settings, the video settings, the cabinet settings, the arcade mode, how to properly do that. Like that was all covered in the last video and also in the install guide, but it's all in here just so that you have that detailed info. But what I will want to cover before we go any further is the batch files that I added. So I did talk about this on the last video. So these are batch files that I added into the main Future Pinball folder. So the idea is with Future Pinball, if you want to run VR, or you want to run cabinet mode, or you want to run desktop mode, well then you have to make changes to this window here for each of those. Problem is, there's not a way to just automatically do that, without coming in here and doing that over and over again. However, you can change the settings in the registry where Future Pinball settings are all stored. So what I do is, before running Future Pinball, you can just run any of these batch files that will make all the changes needed for you. So I did a preset bunch of files that are already doing that for you. So if you look at any of these, now if you want to understand more about these, you just click on this file here, the README first. It explains everything in here, and then it shows you what each one's going to be doing, and then it lists all the different commands that you can change in each one, and also ones that you can add to each one as well, because not all options are changed or added in, right? So for example, the VR one, it's just a text file. A batch file is just a text file named .bat, and whatever commands are inside of it, they just get run. That's what a batch file is. So anything with rem, that's just text. It doesn't get run. It's just for text to read in the file. But anything that's regadd, so any of these commands here, these are the ones that are actually making the changes to Future Pinball's settings here. All right, so that's what it's going to be doing. So the idea is that if you want, you can come in and make changes for your own custom setup, but I've done most of what you need already. But if you want to change things like reflections, for example, you can come in here and enable that or disable it. Anti-aliasing, you can change that as well if you want. Because when you run this file, it's going to make the changes here for you despite it. So if you want anti-aliasing, then you got to, make that change here. So for any of these commands, at the very end after this /D, the number that's right here, that's the actual thing you change. So anything that's like 0, that just means that this feature, arcade mode, for example, is disabled, or a second monitor is disabled, because for VR, we want those both disabled, right? Vertical sync, again, that's disabled, because unless your monitor can match the frequency of your VR headset, then you need to have VSync disabled, right? And I also have reflections disabled, whereas other things are enabled, like Fullscreen, for example. I have that enabled. So you can come in here and make changes to everything except for this section here. Everything here you do not change. These are the ones that have to be set this way so that all tables will work correctly. Don't make changes to those. And then at the very bottom of the file, then it's going to go into the BAM OpenVR folder and then run FP Loader, which is BAM. All right, so that's for VR, and then the idea of each of these, it does the same thing, only they're going to run BAM instead of BAM OpenVR. All right, so you can use any of these. You can make a copy of them. You can, create shortcuts. You can edit the settings all you want, add more, whatever else you want to do. So I basically have one here that will start Future Pinball with the backbox screen enabled. So if you're a multi-screen cabinet user, then that's the one you would use. And this one also runs DMDExt, so that way if you want to have FizX's, external DMD window on a real DMD or on a separate monitor that you use on your cabinet for DMDs, then you can do that. The idea here is this is used without a front end, so that way it makes the changes and does things easily for you. If you want to just Future Pinball with the back box and nothing else, and you can do this one. If you want to run Future Pinball in just single screen desktop mode, you can do this one. If you want to run Future Pinball with a PinEvent table that's using a PuP-Pack, then you can do, and DMDExt is also ran. You can use this one, or just the PinEvent table with the PuP-Pack, and then that will do this one here. And the idea is they're going to enable or disable what is needed depending on what each one of these requires, right? So I just wanted to go through that because that's a big help for you guys. If you understand how those work, they can make things really easy for you. And you can also use those with, like, say, Pinball X or Pinball Y or other front ends. With Pinup Popper, you can use them if you want, but you don't need to because you can add those commands directly into Pinup Popper, which gives you way more control on a per table basis, but that's a different video and that's a different guide. So yeah, so those are here if you guys want to use them, edit them however you want. So just read this file here again for all the info, and yeah. So I just wanted to go through that portion because it's it's new and it's going to help out a lot of people to save a lot of confusion. So I'd recommend using these to run Future Pinball as a good habit. Just make the changes you need. If you want to enable, like, say, anti-aliasing, or if you want to change rotation, or if you want to add a custom resolution because it won't change your resolution, for example, by default. Make whatever changes you want, but just do what the text file tells you. Is the bottom line. All right, so now we can move on. Okay, so this next portion is basically what we talked about in the last video. This is stuff that's already been set up. It's the Future Pinball settings, the editor settings, same thing as before. It's going to tell you what you need to have, what you don't need to have, how things will work correctly. If you want the back box enabled, you have to have these two settings both enabled. If you want it disabled, you want to have both these two settings disabled. And if you still want to have a cabinet mode, but without the back box enabled, for a cabinet view, then you need this setting in BAM enabled. But the bottom line is, if you followed my previous video, all that should already be set up for you. All right, and that's what all this is telling you. It's just describing all that stuff. All right, so for this portion, this is talking about the difference of using full screen, windowed, or borderless windowed. Now, Future Pinball only has a full screen or a windowed option because it's an older program, right? So it doesn't have a borderless windowed option. So it's ideally best to run Future Pinball in full screen with VSync on. However, if you've got, like, say, a setup with G-Sync or FreeSync that's interfering with Future Pinball because you have two different monitors running at a different refresh rate on each one, and it's causing a problem, well, then you could run, for example, the Future Pinball back box in a windowed mode. Or if you are a single screen user and you want to run a PuP-Pack on that one screen, you could run Future Pinball in a windowed mode. And that's how you would use that. However, running in windowed mode is ugly, and I'll show you what I mean. So, for example, if you want to run in windowed mode, well, then you have to disable full screen. You don't touch this. You just leave it at the resolution you already had. You hit OK. And then when you run Future Pinball, it'll run, but you can see the ugly window border is still there, right? So what you do is you can double-click on that and maximize it, but then you're still going to have the ugly border. Taskbar is still there, so you're going to miss portions of the top and bottom of the screen. But it does work. I mean, So if you're happy with that, that's fine. But if you want to have something that looks a little bit nicer, well, I've added some new batch files and apps to basically force Future Pinball into a borderless windowed mode. So those are located in this folder here, in Tools and Other Apps, and Future Pinball to borderless windowed. And then you got a text file here that describes everything you need to know, so you can read that to get more info. But the bottom line is, when you run Future Pinball, I'll show you again. Okay, so once it's up and running, so if you want to now change this to borderless windowed, you could then run the appropriate batch file. So in this case, we want Future Pinball playfield window to borderless. So what that's going to do is that's going to basically run this batch file to make it work. Now understand, normally you have to edit this batch file and specify your window size here. Okay, so I'm running in high def, so this is fine for me. This will work. But if you're running in 4K, then you'll have to put your resolution in there. Okay. So this batch file. So if we run it, and there you go. You can see now it switched Future Pinball into borderless windowed. So where is this handy? Well, let's say you have a front end program. You can add that as part of your startup process with your front end, and that it'll make it work with that without you having to finagle anything or whatever. You just set it up once, and then every time it launches a table, it'll do that for you. Also, you can use this in a PuP-Pack. My PinEvent V2 tables all now have a new option that will do this for you automatically. When you run a table, the PuP-Pack will start, and it will run this same program to make it work for you. But that's going to be another video. So I just wanted to show you because that you do have those options. Okay, it's not perfect. It's not but it does work. So I just wanted to show you that. Okay, so we'll carry on. So yeah, so now it also again goes over the same section of setting up your controls. We talked about that in the last video. Talked about how with nudge controls and all that. I'm not going to go through that in this video, but the bottom line is it's everything you need to know is mentioned in here, and I went through that in the last video, so I'm not going to go through the same thing in this one, but it's all covered in here again. Now I will talk about this. So this is where Future Pinball settings are set. So that's in what's called the registry. So if you run the registry editor, so if you go to this location here, which is up here, that brings you to all of Future Pinball settings right here. Okay, so these are the settings that get changed by our batch files here. Okay, that's what they're changing, is all of this. So and those settings are everything you see in our video and rendering settings. So it's all these guys here. All right, so if for some reason you're having a problem with Future Pinball, for some reason, like you think you've really messed things up, well, then I'm showing you the location of where you can find those settings in the registry. And if you really need to, you can always go in here and then you can delete the entire thing. Or if you want to completely delete all of Future Pinball settings to kind of start from scratch because you're having weird problems with your monitors or other things going on, then you can always go in here and then delete it. And then after that, when you run Future Pinball, it's as if you ran it for the first time again. All right, so that's all this section is talking about. So that way, just in case, you never know, you may need it in the future if things get really messed up. All right. All right. So, and then this section is just talking about how to properly play a Future Pinball table. I mentioned that in the last video. You always have to run FP Loader to start Future Pinball, or in the BAM OpenVR, if it's for VR, you never, ever, ever, ever run Future Pinball EXE, because that's the old program without BAM, and we don't want that, because then new tables won't work. All right, and then it talks about, I did this in the last video, if you want to change your views, your camera views and all that, you can use the function keys. You can change the playfield and backbox size and position. So that's done in the BAM menu, which I'll get to later on. But then when you're done playing a table, you always close Future Pinball. So if I start Future Pinball up, I want to play a table. Okay, great. So I'm going to play the table. And then when I'm done, I just exit the table. Or if you have an error or you have a crash or anything like that, if for any reason you have to exit out of a table that you've loaded, well then before you start a table again, you have to completely close Future Pinball. The reason why you have to do that is you want to make sure that there's nothing left over in memory, and sometimes things can get weird or glitchy if you don't do that. So always completely close Future Pinball before starting another table for any reason whatsoever. When you use a front end like Pinup Popper, it does this for you automatically, so it's not a big deal. But if you're not using a front end, then make sure you do this every time. And then that way you can just run the batch file for whatever you want anyway, so you're good to go. All right, so Future Pinball tables, I talked about this in the last video. So these are links to all the different sites that have Future Pinball tables. The PinEvent tables, those are my table releases. They could be either my original own tables that I've made, or they can be mods that I've done of other tables or updates of other tables to basically give them better new FizX physics. So they finally play fantastic, just like they do on Visual Pinball. You get DOF, PuP-SSF, PuPDMD, ball rolling, and new lighting, new shadows. It's basically my standard of updating a table to have the same quality standard and the same features on every single table. So if you see PinEvent, that means a Terry Red table that's been updated, modded, or my own table that I've created. All right, so and then all these other links are all the various sites you can download tables from. So there's a lot out there. Just understand that there's hundreds of tables out there, thousands maybe. But understand most of the older tables are not updated for newer physics, so they will not play well. They may play completely wrong, like incorrectly, because they were not created for newer physics. So understand that. So if you download a table that has FizX physics, they specify that, then they should play pretty good, depending on how the person did the update, because not everyone does updates the same way, right? But beyond that, though, some older tables, they'll all get updated eventually, but just understand that, so I don't want you guys downloading a bunch of older tables and being like, oh, well, Future Pinball sucks, that they're right about the physics. Well, start with PinEvent tables, okay? They're all completely updated and they all play fantastic. Then start looking for other tables so that you can make a comparison as to what to expect, okay? All right, so now this section, again, it's just telling you, where you copy your table files when you download them. So the table files go into the table folder here. Don't use a subfolder. I know some people like to do that, but you're going to have some tables possibly not work correctly because of the way the scripts work. So I highly recommend making sure they're all in one folder. You're just going to save yourself a lot of hassles by doing that. Library files, those go in here. Some tables have extra files that are put, like, say, sounds or music or textures or whatever into a library file, and they go in here, okay? So make sure you pay attention when you download. Some tables do need that. Some tables do have extra script files, and those would go into the scripts folder here. Like, for example, some have this ball rolling, so pay attention to that. Physics for older tables. So sometimes some tables may have an XML file or a zip file that has an XML file. That's only for old Future Pinball tables, like ZPhysics, for example. But any updated table should be using FizX physics, and FizX physics doesn't use any extra separate files for the physics. The code is all on the table script itself. All right, so now, ball textures, sometimes you can download extra ball textures that people like to use. Those are located in the BAM folder here, in the balls folder. And while you're playing, you can toggle those. And actually, well, here, I'll show you that right now, actually. It won't take long. So when you run a table, BAM automatically checks what's in that folder and then loads those all into RAM. So while you're playing, I'll just get the ball up so where you can see it. Now this is this is not new FizX physics, so it plays terribly. Don't judge based on this new table, okay? So if you hit the letter N on your keyboard, then it's going to change the texture of the ball based on what was in that balls folder, okay? And this will work on most tables, but some tables they'll use like customized ball textures or built into the table, so they may or may not work. So again, yes, please, this is terrible physics. So no, new tables do not play and look like this. So just want you guys to understand that, okay? All right, so and the last one are BAM config files. So for those are basically used. That's what BAM saves all the settings for each table to. So like unlike for example older visual pinball tables where the POV and lighting and a bunch of other stuff is saved directly to the table file, with BAM. It's always been the case where a lot of that stuff gets saved to a separate config file without touching the table file at all. So those get located in your BAM folder. And that's in BAM, config, and they'll be, if basically what BAM does is it looks to see if a file is in there. If there is no file in there, it will create one based on your BAM settings for lighting and numerous other things. Because the player can make some changes to that for themselves, and then that gets saved automatically into this file here. Now, I include config files with my PinEvent tables, so that way it gives you a proper cabinet POV view. So when you download a PinEvent table, you'll install the config file in here, which is like what this one is here, and then it'll be named the same as the table file. And then that way when BAM runs, it'll see that file, and then it'll use that, and then it'll give you a proper POV for your cabinet view. Okay? So yeah, that's basically that. And actually, that's basically what I was just talking about here. So the BAM table config files for cabinet users. So I have included a bunch of files for older tables. So if you go into the Future Pinball BAM info guide, that's what this file here is, table config files. It's just a bunch I made up. You don't have to use them, but for older tables, you know, you can try using these and they'll give you a better cabinet view by default, okay? Just make sure these are named the same as the table file, and again, they have to go into your BAM config folder and make sure it's named the same as the table file. So like this picture shows you, this is before, but then when you use a proper config where everything's set up, then it all fits correctly, okay? So that's what that's all about. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a big thing here, and that is the BAM menu. So when you run a Future Pinball table, that's once the table's up and running, that's when BAM has its features available to the player and to table creators as well. So while you're playing the table, you can bring up the BAM menu and you can change things like the lighting, the camera, post-processing. You can change certain keys. You can change settings on plugins or add-ons, snapshot pictures. And for table developers, you can do a bunch of things as well. And you can also save all your basic default settings that can be applied to every game by default when they first load up. And then what BAM will do is it will then create a config file based on the default settings that you have in the BAM menu. All right. And those default settings, so you could save as default, get saved to this file right here, default config. All right. So when you load up a table, and you made some changes or whatever else, and you're like, oh, I screwed it up, it looks horrible now, well, then you can just choose reset to default, and then it will then use whatever settings are in this file and apply those to your table. So any table you load up, if you think you messed up something, then you can always have it reset to default, or you can just delete the config file, and then next time it loads the table, it will create a config file based on whatever is in this config default config here. All right. Now I will show you one thing. If you're running in windowed mode and you try to go into the BAM menu, it will take Future Pinball out of focus, and then you're gonna have to click back into the window every single time you push the BAM menu key to get into the menu and to get out of the menu every single time. I don't know why it does that, but it does, and there's nothing we can do. But in full screen, we don't have that problem. All right, and so yeah, and BAM does get regular updates. It's had a lot of updates over the years, you know, for new features or bug fixes or who knows what, you know. So that's why I created the Future Pinball BAM Essentials All-in-One package, so that way it's easy for you guys to be fully updated with the latest BAM without having to go through any trickery or be confused. All right, so now, all right, so here, actually, I'll just run the BAM menu just to give you a quick idea. All right, so let's say you start up a Future Pinball table. All right, so now you want to go to the BAM menu. So what you want to do is push either Q or tilde, and then that's going to bring up the BAM menu, and this is where you have lots of options here. So for example, you can change the preset lighting for the table here, to a bunch of different settings, right? You can change the position of the main light if you want, for example. That can have an effect. There's all sorts of things you can do here, and this is Future Pinball's real-time global lighting that affects everything. With the new renderer. Now, if you want to go back to old school Future Pinball renderer, then you can do that, but I highly recommend never doing that because all new tables need new renderer anyway. All right, so you can do lighting, you can do post-processing, you can change all sorts of things, like with the contrast, like all sorts of crazy stuff, your gamma, your saturation, make it in black and white if you want, like you name it. Like there's all sorts of things you can do in here. Now we'll come back to the camera later on, but this is how you can define a desktop camera view. This doesn't apply to cabinet mode. We'll cover that later on. But then you have things like you can change your keys, or the plugins menu, or you have add-ons. Lots of extra things in here, and we'll come back to that. And the snapshot utility, and if you're a developer or table creator, then there's extra stuff in here for you to do that when you're creating tables. Okay, so yeah, and as I mentioned before, if you make a bunch of changes to, say, the lighting and a whole bunch of other stuff, and you like that, well, then when you exit the menu, it automatically is saved to your tables config file. However, if you want to save those to your default, then you can do that here. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to do that quick. So now for cabinet users, again, this is just saying the default POV does not look good, but if you installed my BAM settings files by properly setting up Future Pinball, then it takes care of that for you. However, if you're not sure, just go into my setup and guides, my install guide, my BAM settings, and then you got your BAM settings for cabinet. You would just copy those 3 files, and you'd place those into the BAM folder, and you would hit paste, and then it would replace these files, and then you're all set up for proper cabinet setups, and it will give you a good default point of view that all tables will use. It may not fit them perfectly, but it's way better than what BAM uses by default. So that's what that's talking about. Now, the basic and advanced menu, don't change this. Use the advanced menu only. You'll just have lots of confusion because not all settings are the same for both. Always keep it on advanced. That's the bottom line, okay? Now, the add-ons menu, so I will go back in and show more of that, but basically this is where you can do the Force Arcade mode. So that is required if you're a cabinet user. All right, so that way when we disable the Future Pinball Backbox, especially with PuP-Packs, well then you have to have this enabled so that the cabinet view is still kept when you have the Backbox disabled. All right, so that's what that's all about there. And we have the new renderer, obviously, we use. Config ball and shadows, that's where you can set up your ball shadows for all, and flipper shadows for every table automatically. And you can also enable and disable your raycast ball shadows in there as well. And then you've got, now these things here, I honestly don't know what the kick is. I honestly can't remember what the heck that is. I always keep it off anyway. Trails, so that's ball trails. If you want them on for some reason, you can enable them. Some tables do it through the table script, but I have them off by default. You can change the size of the DMD bulb, the circular dot size if you want. Now, by default, we always have the Hide Future Pinball logo enabled. My BAM settings make that work. If for some reason the Future Pinball watermark is still shown on the bottom right, then you just go in here and set that to on. Now hide overlays, that's only used if you're a cabinet user. So that's going to basically, and I'll show more of that later on, that's going to hide the HUD in the top left corner, like the DMD and all that stuff that you don't want to see when you're in a cabinet view, because that stuff's meant only for desktop view. Frame limiter I usually leave off. The 3D stereo sync mod, that's on for like more for VR, or if you're using a 3D mode with red, blue anaglyph glasses or anything like that. All right, so then I show the differences between the settings of both. So this would be for desktop. This would be, the ball and shadows for raycast shadows can be done here. And those are very demanding on your GPU. So if a table's running slow, double check to make sure this is not turned on. If it's a PinEvent table, they're turned on in the table script. So you have to turn it off in the table script first, and then run the game, come to this menu, and turn it off after the fact. Okay, you have to do both. All right. So again, the Future Pinball watermark, I just talked about that. You don't need hacked versions of Future Pinball or anything like that. BAM will just do that for you automatically now. Okay. And this is the HUD I was talking about. So if you want to hide that, then you just change hide overlays to always. We used to manually just go to the translate editor, and if they were up here, we would move them off screen, and then that way you wouldn't have to see them. But we don't have to do that anymore because BAM takes care of that with this. All right, so that's used when you're in a cabinet view or in a VR mode. All right, because you don't want them in either of those modes. All right, so the plugins menu. All right, so this is going to be for some extra things that honestly most of these you're never going to change, but post FX. Bloom, if you want to enable it, I don't recommend it. It doesn't really necessarily work well. I just recommend keeping it off, but because if you mess up the settings, it will look really bad, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, everything's all blurry, so I highly recommend keeping it off. Cell-shaded ambient occlusion, you can keep that on, but it is more demanding on your GPU, so I'd recommend keeping it off by default. And some tables, like Silent Hill in the future when it comes out, the fog and the holograms won't look good with that enabled. And this is a global setting. It affects every table, so it's either on for all of them or off for all of them. So that unfortunately we can't change that. The pinball high scores. So by default, Future Pinball has an ugly looking high score entry system that's automatically there for tables that use it. But BAM has a nice new one that has a clean look and has extra things for like Kinect cameras support, so you can take pictures and use an avatar in there and all sorts of stuff. So that's what this is for. If you don't want it, you can just disable that. All right. Now the COM extensions. This is basically what allows us to use things like Pinup Player or DOF directly with Future Pinball. So it's important that we have this enabled at a minimum set to safe. If you have this on off, then you'll get errors like this one right here, object required FSO, when you run, say, my PinEvent updates, right? So make sure this is at safe as a minimum, unless you need to have it even higher, then you can set it higher, and that allows the table to do even more stuff from the table script. So just keep in mind, if you have errors, make sure this is still enabled. Now the PUP plugin, there's nothing you guys do with that. That's basically just something that's used for table creators to do things like PUP stream or texture animations or things like that. All right. So the mode menu, so this one is basically the different kind of modes. So that was like for things like head tracking. So you would have, say, static cam or happy cam or PS3i mode or BAM Connect mode, or that's what all you can change those modes. Normally you don't change it at all unless you're using one of those head tracking methods. So table and lighting, I mentioned that already. I showed you earlier. So again, these can be changed on a per table basis, but some tables, like my PinEvent tables, will set this forcibly in the table script. So even if you make changes, the table will override that. So just be aware of that on some tables. Like all my PinEvent tables do that. But I give you options in the table script that will make some changes here if you want to make those changes. And same thing with post-processing, same idea. So again, developer options, I mentioned that before. That's for anyone who wants to make tables, way beyond the scope of this video, but that's what that's all for. All right, so the Backbox. So now this is if you're running a multi-screen setup. So like, in my case here, let's see here. I can do that because I have multiple screens here. So this would be my playfield, this would be my Backbox, and then this would be, say, my DMD or topper or whatever else. So if I enable the Future Pinball Backbox, which is what's going to be shown here, then I can adjust the size of that in this part of the band menu. Now you can do it a whole bunch of different ways. You can do it manually to size it the way you want, or have it automatically fit or stretch. There's a whole bunch of options in here, and this gets saved per table in the BAM config file. All right, so it's kind of hard to easily show that through the menu. That's why I'm kind of going through the manual first, so that way it's a better way to explain it all. And then you can look around the other menus. There's lots of neat stuff, so yeah. And I already showed you how to do the ball texture earlier on. While you're playing, you just press N or P to cycle through the different textures in the balls folder. But not every table will allow that. Like Sonic Pinball Mania, for example, nothing will happen, right? Even though it shows on screen that it made the change, the table uses a custom ball, so a custom ball won't allow the texture to be changed. All right, so this is one we can show you. So this is BAM static camera views, but this is only for desktop mode only. So with Future Pinball, you have the built-in function keys that will change the preset views. But with BAM, you can specify your own static views that never move, and they can be exactly where you want. So you can have it set for all tables for 3 global settings, or you could have it set on a per table basis, and you can have 3 settings per table. And these will get saved to your BAM config file for the table. All right, so I can show you that actually right now. So let's just load this up. So if you installed my BAM settings files for desktop, you'll have all these set up for you automatically with a few nice preset camera views. If you don't, then you'll get some ugly looking ones because the default ones don't look great. So if you push the C key, it will automatically toggle between them, right? So there you can see you've got the normal Future Pinball mode. So if you hit your function keys, it can go through all these different views, but these are preset. You can't change those at all. But if you want to use your own specific static view, exactly customized the way you want, then that's what these are for, right? And whatever you leave this on when you exit the table, that gets written to your BAM config file, and then the next time you load the table, it'll start up in that same view again. It's kind of like Pinball effects, a similar idea to what they do. All right, now, so that if you want to make a change to any of these, so that's going to be done in the camera view menu here. So you open up the BAM menu, you go to the camera, and then therefore you could see, you could set your global settings here, or you could do it on a per table here. So let's just see, like for example, if I, wanted to, I don't know, do a crazy view. So now what I'm doing right now is what I did is I pushed F11 to basically go into manual camera. So if I push F11, now I can use the mouse to move around, and I can use WSAD on the keyboard, just like a first-person shooter, to kind of, move around, or a flight sim or whatever, I guess. I don't know. So if I want to do my own custom view like this, for example, I would just set it to where I want it, and then, you open up the menu here, and you go to whichever preset you want to do. So if you want to do it for all tables globally, you can do it in this one of these, or in this case, I'm just going to do it for this table only. So what you do is you go to the one you want, and then you have to push left shift and then enter. And then you'll see now the save is highlighted. So that when you see that, now you use the up-down arrow keys, you go down, and then you hit enter, boom. So now that's set. So now, if you push C, and we go back to that one, now that's saved for that table to the BAM config file. Okay, and that's basically how you can do your own static camera views through BAM per table. All right, so that's huge. Future Pinball never let you do that. You don't have to add that to table script or anything else. Some tables will do that. My PinEvent tables have preset static views already built in, but you can disable those, and then you can go into the menu and do your own custom one if you want, right? So that's what this section is all about. Very, very handy. All right, and I just explained everything that this is telling you. All right, so this is a bigger topic. Okay, FizX. Now this is a big one for Future Pinball. So Future Pinball basically had a very well-known reputation for not having good physics. Right up until just the last year or so, Future Pinball physics really were not that drastically changed. Like there were some improvements over the years, but the core program, is still the same, right? Whereas when BAM came along, well, it basically opened it up so that we could have access to, the physics engine and be able to change the settings in table script, but it was still fairly limited. Like it was opened up, but it was never really well developed. So what happened was, so the bottom line is, this is describing how that works with BAM. So BAM can use the old original physics, or it can use updated physics with an XML file or a zip file, and then you can have them on a per table basis, or as a default in the BAM folder, or in table script. That's what this is describing and how that works. And what I did was I included a bunch of XML files just for really old tables that have not been updated, and those are going to be in this folder here, and that's what this is. So the idea here is you can take this XML file and find the old table that matches the name, and then you can just put that in the tables folder where the table would be. Oh, get back there, where the table would be. So you'd put the XML file in here, and then you would name it the exact same name as the table. And then when that old table gets loaded up, BAM will automatically apply whatever the physics are in that XML file to this to the table. Okay. Now you can find older versions of these XML files in this folder, all of these, and then you can just copy one of these and then paste them and rename them if you want. But again, this is only for ancient tables. All new tables that use FizX doesn't have anything to do with any of this, okay? But so I wanted to explain that just in case you get an older table that plays absolutely really bad, like wrong, like as in like the physics are not just bad, like they're all wrong, okay? So that's what this is all about. So we come to the big change for Future Pinball, which was FizX Physics. So this was made by Jay Liu with some help and support from Anantet. So basically what Jay Liu did was he adapted the nFozzy physics that are used on the newest and best playing tables on Visual Pinball. He adapted those same techniques to Future Pinball. So he basically literally using BAM, so a combination of, like BAM opening things up, and then some help with Ravarcade and some help with some older code from Gimli. And but he then just completely created his own code with new physics adapted from nFozzy on Visual Pinball, and he made it work on Future Pinball. And it's a complete night and day difference. Future Pinball tables now play right up there with some of the best in Visual Pinball. It's absolutely amazing. No one thought this day would ever come, but it has. And that's what this whole section is talking about. So all my PinEvent tables now are updated with FizX Physics. Other people are starting to update other tables for FizX Physics. So the days of Future Pinball having terrible physics are gone now. That's not even an issue anymore. People are actually believing it, and they're downloading tables that I've updated, and they're blown away. So yeah, that's what this is all describing. And it has a link to the all-in-one example table tutorial topic. And if you want to update a Future Pinball table, yourself to FizX Physics. Well, that's what is in this folder, the tutorial and examples, the all-in-one example table tutorial, and then here's the example table, and here's the tutorial and all the files. And I also did a video on my channel showing you how to do that, and that's all linked in this topic here. Okay, so that's all that's talking about. So yeah, the physics are actually a great thing on Future Pinball. I love it, man. I never thought we'd see the day. Okay, so now we're going to talk about DMDs. So real pinball cabinets, older ones, have a dot matrix display or a DMD. So Future Pinball has support for that built in. Either they can be displayed on the backbox window, or they can be displayed actually on the playfield screen as well, like whether you're in desktop mode or whatever else. You know, you can have multiple DMDs on a Future Pinball table, and it has full support for it. Well, the thing with that is that's great if you have a two-screen setup, but if you have, say, a three-screen cabinet, or let's say you have a real DMD in a cabinet, well, then you want to be able to display the Future Pinball DMD on that real DMD or that third monitor that shows a virtual DMD. So that's what DMDExt is for, DMD extensions. Basically, it's a program that was made by Freezy that is used on Visual Pinball and on Pinball FX and also Future Pinball. So basically, I've included that in the Essentials All-in-One package. It's right here. It's in the Future Pinball main folder, and I have a guide that tells you all about how to use that. But that's what this is describing here. And then these are the support topics. But I do have a guide that will be in another video, and that's this guy right here. Okay? And I've already actually done one, but again, I have an updated guide for that. So there you go. All right, so now another type of display that some tables will have, well, mostly just my PinEvent tables for now at least, PuP-DMD. So PuP is basically Pinup Player. It's an external separate program that a Future Pinball table can make use of to have a modern display with full high definition videos, modern fonts, PNG overlays, GIFs, all sorts of things that are displayed on a separate window that's not part of Future Pinball. So this is ideal for like cabinet setups, ideally. But they can also be used to work with a single screen setup, but that's on a separate video. So all my PinEvent V2 releases will all have modern PuP-DMD displays on them. All right, so that's what this is all talking about. So DOF. So DOF is basically direct output framework made by Swiss Lizard. It's basically a software framework that allows Visual Pinball, Future Pinball, Pinball FX to control real feedback and lighting on a real cabinet. So if you want to have solenoids or a shaker motor, or a blower fan go off while you're playing your Future Pinball table, well, that's what DOF is going to do. So the idea is that you have to program a table to support that, and we'll get to the methods of how that works. But yeah, basically all my PinEvent tables support that. Support DOF directly. It's not something that's automatic. The table author has to add that support to it. Okay. Now, Pinup Player, I already talked about that before. So Pinup Player is used for lots of things. For a Future Pinball, we use it for, it could be for a backglass, a topper, a DMD display. For PuP-Packs, which is basically a collection of the media into one folder. And we can use it for surround sound feedback on Future Pinball. So that's like positional sounds all throughout the table that are very cool. They could be surround sound, they could be stereo, or they could be inside a virtual pinball cabinet to give feedback with shakers and transducers. But again, the table has to be programmed to support that, and all my PinEvent tables support that, and the all-in-one example table, tutorial table also adds that support as well. Okay, so any Future Pinball table can be updated to support this now. It's actually a lot easier, and that goes for DOF as well. That's what the all-in-one example table adds to a Future Pinball table if you go through that. So yeah, And of course, I already talked about PinEvent. These are my releases that have the support for DOF, addressable LEDs, PUP SSF, PUPDMD, FizX, tilt bob, custom settings, night mode, all sorts of things. And you can see I have links to that show you how some of them work. But yeah, all my PinEvent releases, PinEvent V2 releases, all support that. And this just explains why it was needed. So in the older days, Future Pinball basically made it impossible to use anything like that. Eventually, DOFLinx, made by DDH69, was another program that was kind of an in-between that communicated with Future Pinball and then communicated with DOF and Pinup Player. But eventually, then BAM had an update that allowed you to, do a COM plugin for Future Pinball. And once that happened, well, then we could use DOF directly, we could use PUP directly, and we didn't need DOFLinx or another program anymore. And we weren't restricted anymore because we were able to use all the features. And that's why I was able to do the fancy, stuff like this, right? So that's what PinEvent was all about, was making use of all of that. And I basically created a code standard to unify all that so I could add it to a table and make it all work, and as well as a bunch of other extra features. And I wanted to have every single one of my tables or mods or anything I released use the exact same standard. So when you downloaded a table, you knew it would support DOF, PUP, SSF, PUPDMD. The PuP-Packs would have standardized options for every setup out there. And that's what PinEvent is. PinEvent is Terry Red's releases. That's as simple as that, okay? So DOFLinx, I was talking about that before. So DOFLinx is created by DDH. It supports Future Pinball, Pinball FX. It basically, and MAME now, it actually allows basically DOF support to be added to multiple programs in various different ways. But now with the direct support we can have for DOF with Future Pinball, it's not needed as much anymore. But, there's still tables out there that make use of it. And Pinball FX still makes use of it. And MAME can be used with it. So it's a fantastic program. DDH is a great guy, and he's trying to update it for the newer Pinball FX as well. So hopefully that can happen. And so if you don't see if you don't see newer tables using DOFLinx on Future Pinball, it's because we don't need to anymore. So that's why. It's the bottom line. Now, the one thing you do have to understand, and that's what this is telling you, is if you're running any of my PinEvent tables, you cannot have DOFLinx running. The reason why is it'll conflict with the DOF that PinEvent is using, because PinEvent is using DOF directly. And if DOFLinx is also running at the same time, then they'll conflict, and weird things can happen, and your DOF won't work correctly. So the bottom line is you have to make sure DOFLinx is not running, is the bottom line. And you can control that, but that's another video. Now, front ends. Okay, so yeah, Future Pinball can be used with any front end, whether it be Pinball X or Pinball Y. All the forums all have support. A lot of them are already set up to run Future Pinball automatically already. And then Pinup Popper, of course, has great support for Future Pinball, especially due to the fact that we can control Future Pinball settings like I do from these files here, directly in Pinup Popper on a per game basis, and that's extremely handy. And that'll be explained more in the Popper and Baller Installer guide in another video. but this link here is how you can get to download and install Pinup Popper, or you can use Baller Installer. But again, that's way beyond this video. It's just giving you a basic link for that. And then now finally we're talking about virtual reality with Future Pinball. So Future Pinball was actually the first adopter of VR before any other pinball apps were. It was ahead of everything. Like it was, it had VR working fantastic years before Visual Pinball even started to try to do it. Years before Pinball FX had it. It just always had VR support very early on. The big thing with VR though is it's very, very demanding. So the problem was older tables would run great in VR if you had a fast enough PC, but they weren't updated for better physics and better lighting and all that kind of thing. So my PinEvent tables look amazing in VR, but you need a very fast PC. So the bottom line is, you can use Future Pinball VR. It looks absolutely amazing as long as your computer is fast enough. And like here's like a quick example here. You know, this is me playing this in VR, and the PuP-Pack is being streamed into it. So, you know, you can have a really, really cool experience in VR with Future Pinball. You know, like all my latest tables, man. My PC, I just upgraded it.
Michael Myers.
Yeah, see, like all this is in there. It looks super cool.
What have you done? You let him out!
There you go. So yeah, and then what headsets work? Well, I mean, all of them technically should work. It is made for OpenVR initially, so that means any Steam VR headset would work. All the Oculus headsets do work correctly with it now, so that's like MetaQuest 1, MetaQuest 2 or 3, MetaQuest 1, 2, and 3. You know, I've got a MetaQuest 2 and a MetaQuest 3, and they both work fantastic with it, as long as you have a very fast PC. Now, my PC currently is an i5 13600KF for the CPU and an RTX 3080. That is kind of the baseline for the newest tables to run smooth on a MetaQuest 3. So just to give you guys a scope of what's really needed to have it work smoothly and correctly, you know, so it's very demanding, but I do have a guide for that as well. You know, that's going to be another video, so that you'll find that here. So yeah, and there's a support topic as well that's linked in there. And guess what? We're kind of at the end here. So yeah, so basically when you get to the end, asks, well, if you have any problems or frequently asked questions, well, then you would go to the FAQ guide now. It used to be part of this mega guide originally, but now it's a separate one altogether. That way it has all the topics in one single location, whether it be Future Pinball BAM or PinEvent or, you know, VR or other things are all now located in there. Okay, so if you do have questions, that's the place to go. All right, so I guess now, I guess I'm just gonna, I don't know, let me see here. Yeah, I guess just give me a moment here, and maybe I'll try just showing some stuff in the BAM menu here. Okay, so it was kind of hard to kind of go through all these different, you know, settings and features while talking about it. So I'm just gonna load up a table and kind of just go through a few things as best I can. So I'm just going to run it from a desktop mode for now. Here, actually, I'll close this up first. All right, so I'm going to load up Sonic Pinball Mania. All right. All right. So this is running in full screen desktop single screen mode using my normal BAM desktop settings. And this is a PinEvent table. Now, I'm not running a PuP-Pack with this. I'm not going to do that in this video. That's you know, for another video. But any PinEvent table is like any other Future Pinball table. It'll just work no different. It'll use the extra features if you choose to. Otherwise, it just operates like any other table. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the volume down here. Like normally it's really loud. Okay? Like very loud. So I'm going to turn it down, so that way you can hear me better. All right, so here, I'll turn it all the way down for now. So once you're in a table, you can see now that in the bottom right, the watermark for Future Pinball is now gone. The top left has the HUD showed. We want that because we're in desktop mode right now, because we don't have a back box to look at because we don't have a cabinet set up, right? So I'll just go through the BAM menu, and so we already talked about, well, actually, hold on a second here. Let me start this. Yeah, I forgot, for my tables, I have built-in views that change every time I hit enter, so I had to avoid that. So, all right, so I already showed you about this. Now, this table will automatically set all the lighting for you automatically. Like it's preset in the table script. So you can't, like you can change settings here, you know, if you want, but understand that the next time the table loads, it's just going to override that again anyway. So on PinEvent tables, you can make the changes, but they won't stick, is the point. All right. So just understand that. Most other tables you can, though. We already talked about the camera and the post process. So the redefined keys, you could, you know, set a whole bunch of stuff in here as you want. What do we got here? So the plugins. So we talked about that before. So COM extensions, by default, it should be on safe. Okay. So if it was on off, or on paranoid, actually, that's off. That would mess up parts of the table from working correctly, and you'll get an error. So just make sure it's on safe as a minimum. All right, and then change that. Exit the menu. Exit Future Pinball. Close Future Pinball, and then reload the table, and then it should be working after that. All right. So the high scores one, again, I could show you afterwards how that's working. You could disable it if you don't want, or if you need different kind of separators because of different languages and that kind of thing. Post effects, again, this is for things like your bloom. So see, you can enable it, and I mean, sure, I mean, it kind of adds a nice bloom effect, but again, not everyone likes that. It may look good, it may not. I personally recommend keeping it off. Self-shaded occlusion. All right, so if we turn this on, so you can, if you look at the table, look around the table, you'll see the differences with all the shadows. So see, like look at all on the back and all the different areas. You can see all the SSAO or self-shaded ambient occlusion shadows being added to the table. Now, this can be very demanding. Like not all tables will show too much of a hard effect on your GPU, but depending on how fast your PC is, this can have a huge effect. It does look nice though on a lot of tables. It can look really nice. Like it just gives it that nicer, you know, shadowed look, right? But again, this is a global setting, so it affects all tables. So the only way to enable it or disable it is to go back into this menu and, you know, disable it each time, which is a pain in the butt. All right. So hold on a second. I'm just going to stop that there. So I'd recommend normally keeping that off. Now, if you have a cabinet mode that you're running in, if you're running in cabinet mode, then you have to switch it to that and then do that, because you'll notice it doesn't do anything because we're not in cabinet mode. We're in desktop mode right now. All right, so that's post effects. PUP plugin, there's nothing to do. It's just a plugin that works automatically. All right. All right, so the add-on. So this has a bunch of stuff in here. So remember when I mentioned the forced arcade mode? So this is used when you're in a cabinet setup. You have a multi-screen cabinet setup, and you, if you've got the Future Pinball arcade mode and Backbox disabled, then you'll get this kind of view, right? But if you want to have a cabinet kind of view without the Backbox enabled, then you toggle this. So if you toggle this, now you see this is our arcade mode or our cabinet type view. Now understand, normally this would be rotated if we were set up on a cabinet, but it's still the same idea. This is what it would look like. It would just be rotated to fit the screen correctly. And you do that in your Future Pinball video settings. All right? So if you're running a cabinet view, that option should be already enabled. And if it's not, then you have to come in here, go to add-ons, and enable it. If you accidentally have it looking like this and you want to play in desktop mode, then you disable it again. All right? And if you want to re-enable it, you have to go back and do it again. I think, I don't know if there's a key that allows that. Is there? Let's see. Arcade mode, I thought there was. Oh yeah, it's right there. So you can actually set a key if you want. If maybe you want to have a toggle button or something, you know. So you have that option. It's right there. All right, so nope, went that one. All right, so new renderer state, always leave that allowed. Never turn that off. Okay. Config ball and shadow. So this is used for universal settings for your the ball shadow, the flipper shadow, and the ball brightness. So now in this case, with this table, oh shoot, I don't think I have, where is it? Oh, there it is, okay. So, I don't know if it's going to work. Oh, it does. Okay. So if you want to control the ball brightness, you can do that. So let's say you have a table that the ball brightness is too hard to see, it's too dark. Then you can make the changes. You can change the shininess, the reflection, specular, all that stuff. It's right here. And I think this is global or it might be per table. I honestly don't know. I normally don't touch it. So the ball and flipper shadows. Now this is for the generic settings that surround the actual ball. This is not raycast shadows. So this is basically what you're going to see here. So if you look here, so that affects the ball and the flippers. All right. So if you go there, and then that way you can adjust it the way you want. All right. And then you also have raycast ball shadows. Now, raycast ball shadows are basically every light around the table can cast a raycast ball shadow, but the table has to be set up to properly use it so that it looks good. The flashers will automatically work, but the bulbs have to be properly set up. Now, this is very demanding on your GPU. By default, it's turned off, but all PinEvent tables turn that on in the table script. So if you want to turn it, like if you're having a hard time getting the table to run smooth, then you'll have to turn it off in the table script. My install instructions tell you how to do it on every table. And then while you're playing the table, you have to come in and turn them off here. Okay? So while the ball is going around, you're going to see the raycast ball shadows, you can kind of see how the ball is, casting a little bit of shadow there every time it goes by any GI bulbs or bulbs around the table. I'll just try playing a bit, and then you can see what I'm talking about. So watch the ball at different points. You can kind of see some shadows. There you go. See how the shadows being cast from the spotlight? Those are raycast shadows. They're very demanding on your GPU, but they do look very cool, especially when you get into like high resolutions. And there you go. You can see them being cast there, right? So it's up to you if you don't want them running. If you want them to turn them off in here, okay? Some tables will look horrible with those on because the table was not set up properly for them. So if a table has weird looking shadows, then you can turn them off in here and then you'll be good to go. So, yeah. So that's it for that. Again, the kick, I don't know for sure what that actually is. Like, I really don't know for sure what that is actually used for. All these years, I've never really understood, and I've never bothered even trying to use it. I really don't know what it actually does. Yeah, I don't know what it does. So I always just keep it off. I don't know, man. Target, yeah, I don't know. Ball border, I really should check that out. Trails, again, it depends. If you want them on all the time, then sure, you can, have them on. Now, ironically, on this table, I think I have them forced on and off because I add the effect manually on this table, but I don't think they'll show. Goddamn, I'll get down there. Come on. There we go. All right, let's see. Yeah, I don't think they're going to show. No, they're not going to. Okay, so that's okay. If you want to have the nice... if you want to have the nice ball trail effect, you can do that here as well. Now the DMD bulb size, so that's going to be, so see the DMD on the top left? So that's going to affect that. So if I change it to 2, then you can have it look like that. You might prefer that. You might not. Everyone's different. Now, so the hide Future Pinball logo, so if you turn it off, there's a Future Pinball watermark that so many people did not like. Especially back in the day when you had screen burn-in, right? So now you have the option to hide it, and once you enable it, it'll fade away after the table first loads. Now, hide overlays. So what that would do is the upper left, where you see the DMD and the toggling graphics going on there, the characters, that's your HUD. The HUD is basically what's meant to be shown in a desktop view like this. So if you want to have that hidden all the time because you're playing in VR or you're playing in a cabinet view, then you have to do that here. And if you enable it, boom, it's gone. So that will keep it always hidden, because some tables will have multiple layers of that fade in and out. So even if you have it set to on game start, well, that's not good enough for some tables, right? So sometimes you want that, but you don't want that for a desktop view, because you need it. You know, that's your actual score display, your DMD, right? Frame limiter, I normally keep that off. I never fully understood exactly how that works. I find it's just better to keep it off, but you know, your mileage may vary. 3D sync and VR sync, that's only for 3D mode, for red, green, blue glasses mode, and for which is in arcade mode, or for VR. So you don't get that in the normal desktop view. All right, and so I think that's about it. Yeah, so that's about it for the cabinet views. Yeah, or I mean, sorry, the desktop stuff. So that's about it for you know, the main BAM menu settings. Because we're not going to go into, you know, the dev options. That's for table creators. So here's what I was talking about before. This is the high score plugin. So this is the newer BAM one. So this one is you know, it's actually much nicer. It allows for things like profiles. It shows your score at the end, so you can see what my score was. You can create like you know, a new profile. I don't know if this will work actually, because I got the Kinect hooked up. Hold on, I don't know if this will take a photo. Let's see if this will. No, okay, so I don't have it. I don't have it enabled. Oh, darn! Because I'm using my Kinect to actually record my voice on this video. So if you had a Kinect, which people use for head tracking, set up with BAM, and you have the plugin enabled and all that kind of stuff, you could actually take a photo using that with this. Kind of like what Jersey Jack Pinball does with some of their pinball machines. But unfortunately, it only works with that. It doesn't work with regular webcams and stuff. So unfortunately, it's kind of limited with what you can do. But you can give yourself a name and you know, a profile. You could save it here. So that way, when you enter your high scores, you can just enter your profile instead of your initials, right? So it's kind of neat. It's not many people make use of it, but you know, it's a pretty neat idea. So instead, you can just do the normal, enter your score, and then the game carries on. All right, so that's the high score plugin. If you don't want that, then you just go back to add-ons and, oh, sorry, not add-ons, plugins, and this guy here. And if you disable it, then the old ugly Future Pinball one is used instead, which looks horrible. All right, so that's basically the settings when you're running in a desktop view, okay? So I know it's a lot, but I mean, it's easier to show you and explain it, not just talk about what's in the guide, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of set this up for as if it was a cabinet setup, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pretend we did a full install of the whole Future Pinball BAM Essentials all-in-one package, the latest version. And so now I'm going to set this up for my cabinet. So what I do is I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go into my install guide folder, BAM settings, and cabinet. And then I'm going to copy these files into my BAM folder. And then I'm going to overwrite the 3 files. Okay, so now we're using the default settings for a cabinet setup. All right, so that way you guys don't have to try to figure out, because it is kind of confusing to figure out on your own. So that's good. So now, actually, I'll close Future Pinball for a second. So now I want to have Future Pinball running with a backbox. So easy way to do that is I'll just run this guy. So this is important to make sure you get right. So if you never took the time to set this up before, what you want to do is you want to go into video rendering settings, and you want to double check. Now that batch file here automatically applies the proper settings that we need. The only thing it won't do is it won't set your resolution, the display number, and rotation. Okay? So for this particular setup, because my cabinet setup is using landscape for my main screen here, not portrait, I have to change my rotation to 270, and that's it for the Future Pinball settings. Now, again, you can add this to your to these files if you want. By default, they're not on there, but again, you can copy the command into there and make the change so that way it's always going to change this for you. If you want to go back and forth between, like, say, VR and a cabinet setup, for example. All right, so it automatically set this and this. So by having both of these set, enabled, that's going to have our Future Pinball Backbox window work. Okay, if you don't have both of these enabled, it won't work. So the other thing you have to check is your backbox. So you click backbox, and then you got to make sure it's going to use the display that works for you. What I mean by that is these numbers don't always match what is in here. So see, my Windows shows it as 3 and 1, and here it's 1 and 2, and this is what works for me. You may have different numbers. You could have something like 5 and 6. Like, bottom line is you basically have to choose whichever ones work. Okay, there's no easy solution. By default, Future Pinball chooses the first one for the playfield, and then the second one for the backbox. As long as you had this set up correctly when the computer powered on, it's usually pretty good. But if not, then it can get confusing. All right, so as long as you have the backbox set up correctly and you have the right resolution, because they're both different, right? Like you can have a different resolution for your backbox than you do for your playfield. Two different windows, right? So make sure you check that is correct. And in my case, it's like that for both of them. Okay, so make sure that's correct for both the playfield and your backbox. Okay, so as long as all those are enabled, then that's all you need. So now I can run Sonic with both my playfield and backbox. So now you can see it's rotated. So if I was at a cabinet, then this would look correct. Now you can't see the second screen, but the second screen is showing the backbox on my second TV here. So if you want to make any changes or adjustments, then you would do that from the BAM menu. Now, if I pre-installed the config file for this table, I can't remember if I did, to be honest, it should have a good POV automatically. And it looks like it pretty much does. Okay, so it's pretty good. So you can see the POV was installed correctly. Everything's happy. It's working as intended. So it's all good. All right. So now, here, I'll turn the volume up a little bit. So the backbox is already displayed. But if you go to the BAM menu, now I know this is hard to see from this point of view. So what I'll do is I'll just go to the settings here and I'll rotate it. Hold on. There we go. Okay. So basically, if you want to make any adjustments on the BAM menu, you can just bring it up and ignore that stuff on the right side. That's kind of all messed up. I'm not sure what that's showing here. I'll just do this. That works. And we'll just increase that in size. There we go. All right. So if you want to make changes to your POV, for example, here, I'll turn that down again. You have to now go to the menus that are going to be different for this now. So because we're in arcade mode or forced arcade mode, because remember, we had to have that enabled, right? And if that's not enabled, then Future Pinball won't load into cabinet mode. And if it doesn't load into cabinet mode, then it doesn't do certain settings based on that fact. So you have to make sure everything's set correctly before you launch a table. So if you have to make changes, make the changes, exit the table, exit Future Pinball, come back in, and then try it out and see if everything's working correctly. All right. So if you want to make changes to the POV, you can. You have to work your way back to this. It's a little different now because we're in cabinet view, the table and lighting menu. So you can see now we have a whole bunch of extra settings here, a whole bunch of new menus. We have a 3D menu now. So I don't have 3D set up on here, but you can try doing different types of 3D for depending on what kind of glasses you have and all that. So you have all those kind of options in there. What else do we have? So now you can make your way to the table and lighting menu, and that's where you can adjust your POV. So for example, if you want to adjust the angle, you adjust that like here. All right. If you want to, now I kind of prefer it like that. If you want to adjust the scale, you do that. If you want to adjust the size, you do that. If you want to adjust the offset of the position, you can do that here. Now, the thing to remember is for Future Pinball, the entire game room and cabinet is always being used. All the time, no matter what. Doesn't matter what mode you're in. All right. So you can just make whatever changes you want, and then you can still make changes to your lighting, just like before. But again, tables like this will override that, so keep that in mind. Same thing for post-processing. But now you have a backbox menu, option that you can choose. So this is if you want to adjust the size and scale of the Future Pinball backbox. This does not apply to PuP-Packs, okay? So if you're running a PinEvent table like Sonic and you have a PuP-Pack being displayed, well then normally you would have the Future Pinball backbox disabled, the arcade mode disabled in the Future Pinball settings, not the BAM settings, and then you just only have the PuP-Pack being displayed. But in this case, we're running it without a PuP-Pack, so now you're going to want to adjust the backbox settings. And then you can see here, now I can't show you how it looks because that's on the other screen, but you have all the options in here to make all sorts of changes. You can do it manually, you can have it stretched, there's all sorts of options that you can have in here. So yeah, it's all done in there, and this is saved per table in your config file, so it's all done in here, okay? So this is the main stuff you'd want to find for adjusting your size and position on a per table basis. Now, I include a config file that has this preset for my table releases, but no one else pretty much does. So you may have to do this for other tables that I don't release. All right, so we'll just turn the sound up a little bit if I can. Hold on. Oh, I'm doing it wrong one. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on there? Oh, hold on. Oh, I know. The game's not started. Oh, there we go. I was wondering what was going on. So therefore, now we're playing in a cabinet view. And then now you can see everything much nicer. You can see the shadows. You can see the game view really nicely. Now I'm playing this sideways, guys. So bear with me. Oh, jeez. Got it. It's not easy when you're trying to do this sideways. And so you can see now we got FizX, so you can do micro flips. You can have much more control over the ball. You can try to do post passing. Well, I didn't do it there, but you can try to do post passes if you want. Live catches, drop catches. Flipper nudging. There you go, a post pass right there. So yeah, there you go. Alright. I know, it's not a great example of gameplay, but bottom line is, it's working. And now you have a better idea of how to adjust your POVs and your backbox settings if you're not running a PuP-Pack. Okay? So yeah. I think that's about the last of it, really. Not much more to go through. We kind of covered everything here. I know that's a lot, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff to go through. I mean, there's a lot of settings and lots of options and features and stuff, right? So there you go. So again, now that we're at the end of this video, there's a separate FAQ and help guide now. So if you're having problems, you can always go to that guide there. I have it included. It's right here. And then if you bring that up, it's going to look similar, but that's the start of it. And then you can go through, and then it has answers to the most common errors or questions or problems that you may have. Like if you're running in cabinet view and your HUD display is still on, how to get rid of that, the Future Pinball watermark. If you got this view, but you don't want that because you're in a cabinet, all sorts of answers to the most common problems that most people have are all in here. So I'd recommend going in there first when you are set up, but then you're having some issues going on there. So yeah, so there you go. So that's come to the end there, guys. So thank you for zipping through this very long video. I always put chapters in everything. And I know my videos tend to run long, but the thing is, it's a lot of content, guys. You know, like I'm not, like I can't make a short video based on each person's specific needs or preferences. I have to cover everybody, right? So that's why I make these guides. So that way you guys can go to them at your own time. You can read the info and then, you know, take your time to make changes if you want for personal preferences. And I put chapters in these videos so you can jump to spots directly as well. So that's a part 2 being done for this sucker here. Now, I'm not sure what's going to be the next one. It could be any one of these, but thanks for tuning in. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next video, and then enjoy some great future pinball tables. Have fun, guys.